All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to City Club Missoula's August Forum, the evolving landscape of education, funding, and changes to the Department of Education. I'm Alex Karklins. I have the great privilege of serving as chair of the City Club of Missoula Board of Directors in 2025. Thank you all for being here today. City Club's mission is to bring together people to inform and inspire citizens on issues vital to the Missoula area community through public forums that encourage the discussion of new ideas and the free exchange of thought. We have a deep commitment to civility and civil discourse, even when discussing challenging topics. Some sincere thank yous. First, let me thank Missoula Community Access Television for recording all of our forums as part of their media assistance grants to nonprofit organizations. MCAT serves our community on cable channels 189 and 190. You can view past forums on MCAT's YouTube channel. A special thank you to our executive level sponsors, Blackfoot Communications and First Security Bank. Our executive level sponsors are key partners in helping expand audience access and public awareness of upcoming forums. We are grateful to all of our sponsors at all sponsorship levels for their generosity and advocacy for our mission. We invite you to join as a sponsor or as a member by visiting cityclubmissoula.com. Thank you to our board of directors and especially our administrator, Yenny Rohrbach, who keeps things running smoothly behind the scenes. City Club would also like to acknowledge that we are in the Aboriginal territories of the Salish and Kalispel people, some of whom may be present with us today at this forum. Today we honor the path they have shown us in caring for this place for generations to come. Finally, 2025 marks the 20th anniversary of City Club Missoula. Thank you to all of those who have participated in our forums, provided sponsorships, and volunteered their time as board members over the years. We owe our current success to you. Now on to our panelists for the forum. First, we have Susie Hedalen. She's been serving as Montana's Superintendent of Public Instruction since January of this year. Prior to her election as State Superintendent, Susie served as the District Superintendent for Townsend Public Schools and as Vice Chair of the Montana Board of Public Education. She spent nearly 2 decades working in Montana's education system as a classroom teacher, principal, and superintendent in some of our state's smallest rural schools up to our largest AA districts. She also previously served as a Deputy Superintendent at OPI. Susie graduated from Montana State University Bozeman with a bachelor's in elementary education, a master's in educational leadership, and a certificate in Native American studies. She is passionate about returning to the Office of Public Instruction to being a service-oriented agency with a focus on education, student and family support, school safety, and improved academic outcomes through partnership building. Next, we have Dale Olinger, Superintendent of Lolo School District. Dale is a Missoula native. He is a product of Missoula County Public Schools from kindergarten through high school and earned his undergraduate degree in elementary education from the University of Montana. In 2007, he was hired at Lolo as a science teacher for 7th and 8th grades. After completing his master's degree at Rocky Mountain College, Dale was hired as Lolo's elementary principal, then as middle school principal 4 years later. During his 8 years as superintendent, Dale has worked with the Board of Trustees to rekindle the school's connection with the community, ultimately resulting in a brand new $29 million school that benefits students for generations to come. He has served as the president of the Montana Association of School Superintendents and the president of School Administration of Montana. When he's not advocating for public education, Dale serves on the board of the Spectrum Science Discovery Area and is the treasurer and first vice president of Scouting America Montana Council. Common thread in Dale's endeavors is service to youth and the greater good. And finally, we have Micah Hill, Superintendent of Missoula County Public Schools. Micah is a graduate of Polson High School, which is also where he met his wife, Nicole. Together, Micah and Nicole pursued education degrees, largely due to the pivotal roles that teachers played in his own life. He earned a bachelor's degree in English education at Montana State University and went on to earn his master's in educational leadership and superintendent's endorsement, both from the University of Montana. Micah began his teaching career in Colstrip, Montana, before returning to Flathead Valley, where he has over 2 decades of service as an administrator for Kalispell Public Schools and is entering his 3rd year serving as superintendent for Missoula County Public Schools. Micah and Nicole have 3 adult children and a daughter-in-law living and working in Missoula. Micah most appreciates the meaningful relationships he develops with colleagues, families, and students through his role as an educational leader. He is passionate about innovative education and partnering with the broader community to support student opportunities for growth and success. Throughout his career, he has especially valued relating to students coming from diverse or non-traditional backgrounds. So that's enough for the introductions. Micah will start us off.
Well, thank you for the introduction, and I drew the short straw. I'm going to go first, so I'll start by saying good to see so many people that I recognize, familiar faces and friendly faces. I see one of my trustees is here, a professor of mine is here, and just other notable people from our community, and it's great to see so many people who have shown up today to hear us speak a little bit about school finance, budgets, and all things related to that. And I'm going to start by saying that school finance is complicated and not very transparent, and probably intentionally. It kind of keeps us guessing on what's going on, what's happening, and how we change and adapt in an evolving landscape around public education, knowing that we are almost exclusively taxpayer funded. And so it's with honor and it's with gratitude that we talk to our taxpayers about the pivotal role that their support means to us, both from a state level and from a local level. So I like to try and break things down into manageable chunks, and a 30,000-foot view of Missoula County Public Schools, which incorporates our 3 large high schools and Sealy High School, as well as 9 elementaries and 3 middle schools and 2 public charter schools. Our budget is made up of about 14% federal dollars. 49% of our budget is local taxes, and the other 38% comes from the state. And so you'll hear us talk a little bit today about how those are impacting us in our different districts. And recognizing that there is a really unique opportunity. You have a superintendent from a smaller K-8 district, of which there are lots of those in Montana, versus 14, or actually 8 AA school districts. And so you're going to get a diverse perspective on this. The recent hoopla around federal funding, if you've been paying attention, federal Department of Education froze funding to school districts across the nation, and this impacted Montana, and in particular Missoula County Public Schools. At our last board meeting, we had to set aside $1 million of potentially lost federal funding due to those freezes. We're in a very fortunate position to have a savings account of sorts, but if we spent those dollars, they're one-time only, meaning they're not going to be replenished, and that means that we would be doing without in some other way in our district. Those dollars have since been released and reallocated, and so I should probably talk a little bit more into the microphone. Just say that if I start drifting away. I'll talk a little bit closer to the microphone. I think what's looming for us is whether or not any of those dollars that they froze will actually be available in the new budget bill. And so these are dollars that specifically target our after-school programs. They're dollars that target our professional development funding for our teachers. They're dollars that, for Missoula County Public Schools, pays for additional staff to reduce class sizes. It is for tutors for English language learners. It has a really broad impact for a school district of our size. And so we're thankful that those were released, but we're also contemplating what does the future look like without those dollars for our district, and if we're having to either do without or to reallocate resources in another way to support that. Some of our current challenges, and I think anybody, and Susie and Dale could speak to this as well, is the inflation impact. So just going to give you some really broad-based numbers here. There's been a escalating gap between inflation, the consumer price index for urban areas, and what the state allocates. The state by law cannot give more than a 3% inflationary increase to public school funding for the different areas that we get funded through the state. So there's a 3% cap. Going back to 2020, the inflation, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, from 2020 to 2024 rose 21%. Our legislature meets every biennium, and they allocate additional resources and funding, and they increased our funding for public schools by 9.5% in that same year. So in 2022, inflation was up 8%. We got a 1.5% increase. So when you talk about how that impacts a school district or impacts education, considering that for school districts my size, about 90% of our budget is staffing and benefits, is salary and benefits, you can understand that that has a pretty significant impact when we're losing on that. And so we're put into a position where we're having to cut resources, where we're cutting teachers, we're cutting programs in order to just maintain what we have. And so that's significant for us. 90% is staffing. The other 10% are the things like buying a desk and chair, buying a computer, paying for our property and liability insurance. Just our property and liability insurance for Missoula County Public Schools is over $1 million annually. So when you start whittling away at some of those dollars and things that we don't have any control over, it leaves very little for what you do have control over. The other thing that isn't widely known is that when the state gives an inflationary increase, it's actually only to 80% of your budget. So when they say a 3% increase, we actually get around 2.6% versus the 3%, because every year you probably see me at some civic organization or in the news or giving presentations in our community about the need to have operational levies. 20% of our budgets come from locally voted levies. Missoula County Public Schools has been amazing at supporting those. I'm not sure the last time that it hasn't been supported from a operational levy standpoint. There are other communities down the Bitterroot here locally where they put out requests for levies and the community has not voted in favor of those. And those really truly have an impact. Am I doing okay time-wise? All right, good. But there are some bright spots. One of the bright spots was the STARS Act, which was an attempt by the state, and I'm going to editorialize a little bit here because I haven't really asked anyone specifically, but number one, we're identifying that Montana ranked 51st in starting teacher pay in the country. And so this was an attempt to move the average starting teacher pay from $38,000 to $41,613. So that's the new starting teacher pay if you accept the conditions of the STARS Act. Part of the conditions are that you have to pay at least by 2030, you have to be paying your starting teacher pay at least 70% of your average teacher pay. So there are some districts who actually did not accept those funds. They don't know that they can actually make the finances work on that. So it's great to see that we're addressing that. The state put in over $100 million to that effort. It was also meant to address the inflationary gap. We still don't believe, or I'll say I still don't believe, that they have done enough to address that. But when we start talking about funding and the different things that are coming up, thank you, everybody. Thanks, Dale, for the save. But we still believe that they're coming up about $40 to $60 million short of just the inflationary increase that we think we should have been allocated based off of what our real costs are for our districts. The other bright spot, at least I'm being optimistic, is the decennial study. So a decennial study by Montana law is required every 10 years for the state legislature to convene a group of people to look at the funding formula for Montana. Required by law, so every 10 years. The last decennial study, I'm not really sure anything meaningful came out of that, and we have a group of advocates and different people who are pushing this group of people, which is comprised of 12 legislators, other members of our community, including people like Susie, who are looking at how they can best support public education and what is a fair and equitable way to finance Montana's public education. It's really looking at a variety of factors, including where you live as being a component of that. It's looking at equity and adequacy, meaning that there are districts that can easily raise funds based on their tax base versus other districts that can't. It's about teacher recruitment and retention, keeping in mind that from my chair, I want to see where we are hiring the best and the brightest people in Montana to serve our kids, not outsourcing them to Wyoming and Idaho and Washington and California, other places where they can go and have a better living and work within a system that truly supports public education. My time's up.
All right, and like Micah, thank you all for the invitation to be here. I appreciate it, and I also see a lot of friendly, familiar faces in the room. So my thoughts are a lot less linear than Micah's, but that's okay. Just bear with me. I thought with the topic that was advertised, we might cover a few things that folks don't really know go on behind the scenes. So relative to the federal level and the funding we get, Micah talked about the title funds that were withheld for a while and have now been released. That creates a lot of instability as we look to the future, and we don't know. Sure, they got released now for the coming year, but we don't know what that means for the future. And like other schools, Lolo relies on those funds to provide services to kids. Without those funds, we cannot absorb the cost of providing those services. They will simply go away. We cannot raise funds, enough funds via a voted levy, because in a place like Lolo, asking for $50,000 costs the individual homeowner a heck of a lot more than raising $50,000 in a place that has a tax base like the city of Missoula. So it's just a different operation, and we cannot compete in those circumstances. So in addition to the title funding, there are other places where instability at the federal level makes me a little uneasy. We have federal funding that helps pay for our school lunch program, right? School nutrition. We don't know what's going to happen. There was huge cuts to the Forest Service. That's all part of USDA. USDA is the program through which we get our school nutrition. And there's not a way that we could continue to feed the kids who can't afford their breakfast and lunch if those funds go away. There are E-rate funds. Probably never heard of it, because why would you? And in our case, E-rate pays for part of our school to have 2 gig internet. That's really important in today's day and age, right? We cannot go without having all the devices for all the Internet of Things connected at all times to the fastest possible internet so that kids can learn and have access to the programs and all that stuff. Well, E-rate's been on the chopping block. It's really a very small sliver of federal funding in the grand scheme. It's itty bitty, but it's easy to pick on because people don't understand it. So E-rate's just another one of those things that if we had to absorb that $12,000 to $15,000 a year, I don't know how we do that exactly. So there's lots of different components of the federal funding that we get that aren't necessarily very exciting, but they're super important, not the least of which also includes special education. We already don't get enough funding to cover the actual costs of delivering specialized services to students with disabilities. The state has done a good job in the last few legislative sessions of trying to increase the state's contribution because we don't get enough from the feds, but it still doesn't cover the cost. So we end up kind of taking that out of on our tax base, whether they like it or not, because we have to cover the costs to deliver the services that not only are required, but they're what those kids deserve. Some require just a few services, and some require heavy-duty services. And either way, they deserve access to that free public education because that's what we do, right? That's our job in a public school, is to make sure all those kids have an opportunity, because they're all going to be adults someday. They need the skills that we can offer them in order to be successful contributing members of society. There are a few other things at the federal level that aren't necessarily tied to funding that can get a little uneasy. Whoever thought that changes with immigration laws and those practices could impact schools in Montana? They do. In Lolo, we have 1 foreign teacher, so not a huge impact for us on a J-1 visa. I assume that he's going to be let back in the country next week when he comes back to school and back to work after visiting his family in Philippines. I hope, right? Will he be renewed? Probably not. His visa can't be renewed anyway, but there are schools in the central and eastern part of the state that have dozens of foreign teachers because that's who they can recruit and get into their workforce. We don't know how that's going to impact. So even though it's not necessarily funding, that's a tool that we've had in our toolbox to address teacher shortages, is getting people from outside the country. That may or may not be a tool in the future. We just don't know. Let's see. I'm not sure where I was going with all of that. That was a pretty good collection for the first 5 minutes, and then I sort of lost it. Let's take it back to the state level now. For a district like Lolo, and as Micah said, there's lots of independent K-12s and K-8s across the state of Montana. We make up most of the state as far as the number of districts go. Whether or not it's the best system and most efficient system, I can't say, but it's what we've got in Montana, so this is what we're working with. There have been lots and lots of changes, and I dare call it meddling at the legislature for the last 10 years, particularly as it relates to local school districts and what powers they have, don't have, retain, have lost. It's been interesting. I would characterize some of the things that have happened in the legislature as just political moves, and that's part of the legislature, so that's not so bad. There are also a lot of things that create, for lack of a better term, perhaps tripping hazards for local school districts. New rules and things that you have to do just in a certain way to meet the letter of the law, and if you don't do those things exactly right, parents can come after you. And I don't know a school in the state that would ever try to usurp the law, administrative rule, or anything like that. But when you have one bill that impacts 20 different sections of law, and we have to make sure that we're keeping up with all of those things, sending out the permission slip or the notice or the opt-out or the whatever at just the right time, because you only have this window to send that out in, and if it's not in the window, it doesn't count, and if you forget to send it at all, boy, you're in trouble. It's just those sorts of things that have been added on to public schools over and over and over, and it creates a challenge. Our principals run around with their hair on fire trying to make sure that just they're meeting those regulations. Another thing that might be of interest is open enrollment. So 2 sessions ago in 2023, the legislature kind of took away some of what used to be local control in that they said all school districts have to offer open enrollment now. If you're a public school, you're going to offer open enrollment. You can't be closed, no matter what your circumstances are. And here are the limited number of exclusions that you can say, nope, we're full in this grade level or something like that. That's fine, I guess, if you want to make that choice open to all families. Here's the part you may not know. When a student of a certain district goes to another public school, which they're now allowed to apply for, the next year, the school where they attended bills the school where they live for tuition. I bet you didn't know that. We're working with that right now. Some school districts, the tax base is making out great because they have a lot of kids who have traditionally come from out of that district and attended that school. Well, that's great for them. There are school districts like Lolo who are going to get hit with about an $80,000 net bill that don't know that because their kids because their resident children attend a different school district because it's allowed, that they're going to have to pay tuition to those other taxpayers. That's going to fly like a lead balloon, right? And there's no choice. This is permissively levied and it's exchange among tax base, okay? But when my taxpayers in Lolo see that their taxes went up $70,000 to pay other neighboring school districts, some just for 1 kid, some for 30 kids, they're going to go, well, if you're just going to bill me for all that, why on earth would I vote for a levy? You're already raising my taxes. It just creates something that I can't overcome with all of the good press, kids out singing Christmas carols. It doesn't matter. We're just not cute enough to overcome those real dollars that are coming out of your taxes, right? And people do look at their tax bills these days, if you haven't noticed. They're quite in tune with that. Good news, there has been some tax relief in the last legislative session, so your standard first home, class 4 property, your taxes are going to go down, and that's great news, but still probably not enough to ultimately swing the needle in favor of public schools, especially in small districts where you have to ask a lot to get a little. So there you go. There's some stuff. Thanks very much.
Is mine dead? Oh, there we go. Okay, I do have 1 bar, so we'll see. I might be having to loan yours as well. Susie Hedalen, thank you so much for having me this afternoon. It's so nice to see so many friendly faces, like you all said, and so many people that we know. So thank you for being here to talk about these important topics. And I have a few insights. Hopefully I can answer a few questions that you guys posed and also share some different information. So We did see what has been called a freeze or was a hold on our school federal funding. However, we did see at the OPI different funding streams trickling in. So rather than getting them all in one package like we formerly had by July 1st, this summer we did see them trickle in. The most important part of that job to me was to make sure we were communicating well with school districts. Like was shared in my intro, my goal is to make the OPI more customer service orientated to our schools, our school leaders, our legislators, representatives, parents, and students across the state of Montana. So my priority is to get that information out as soon as I get it. There used to be a monthly newsletter coming out of the OPI. It's now weekly. And if we get critical information like a funding stream coming in that you've all been waiting for, we're sending it out that day. So we're communicating as expediently as we can. And our team is all hands on deck to get the calculations taken care of so we can load those dollars in the e-grants is our funding system that the schools access their federal dollars in. So that has been a top priority for us. There was something interesting that happened. We did get pretty much Oh, it was on. There we go. Okay. Which we called grant award notifications, our amounts for each federal funding stream were pretty well level. We even had some like Title IV, school safety and technology that went up a little bit. Our Title I was level funded, for example. However, they did change the funding formula. So districts across the state of Montana may have seen a change up or down because they lowered the eligibility requirements. So more schools were allowed or more schools were eligible for Title I funding to support all of the great things that you talked about, reduction in class size, tutoring, all of those things. That funding, the formula was changed, so more schools were able to receive those dollars, but it was the same amount of dollars, right? So some schools did see a small decline. Some schools got funded for the first time that hadn't previously been eligible. So I share some of your concerns. I know, just a year ago, I was on the other side of the desk trying to put my school budget together. And that's why I really love being in this position, because I know the challenges that you all face every day. And I worked on that side of the desk, like I said, just recently. So I know how important it is to have this information, be able to plan for the next school year, and get your budget put together by law on August 15th. Local districts and school boards have to approve their budgets. So we were working very closely with our congressional delegation. I have been calling the administration. I've been calling Secretary McMahon and her team. I've been advocating through CCSSO, which is my state chiefs organization. And we were actually all together at a state chiefs conference when we got the notification that all of this final group of funding was being released. And I thought it was kind of coincidental. We were all together and advocating very strongly that we needed this funding to come sooner than later. I also have been working closely, like I said, with our congressman. Senator Daines had given me a heads up just a couple hours before I got the email that those funds were coming in. So we are glad to have those folks helping us in advocating for our school funds that are very important. We do have some challenges, and I do share some concerns with the future. We knew that, I was very optimistic about these funds coming in. I knew that they were taking a close look at them, but they'd already been appropriated by Congress. So I did have some confidence that these funds were coming in. In the future, there is some concerns. I heard from different legislators as well as the administration at the federal level that Title II is one that's maybe most at risk. That is the funding stream that's for professional development. I heard comments said like, teachers should already know how to teach, right? Which is concerning to some of us that are lifelong learners and educators, because we know how important it is that you continue to learn and learn best practices. And if you have a new curriculum, you have the time to learn that and implement that. So we'll continue to advocate for that and help however we can at the state level. I'm trying to strengthen our team at the OPI to be a resource to get back out into the schools and supporting professional development and those kinds of things. So we're excited for that. I did want to say that with E-rate, it's just a tiny part of the program. I did get clarity from Riley in Senator Dane's office. They work very closely with the senator from Colorado that's on the education committee, so we get some insights there. So they did call and ask us if we had any concerns with E-rate. They said it's just the part where they were having some computers in homes that was under consideration for being cut, not E-rate as a whole. So we got some reassurance there. Yes, because we know that helps with those internet bills and our computer purchases at the schools. So that was important. I wanted to mention that I have had a chance to meet with Secretary McMahon, and she does talk a lot about special education. It is something that she seems to be very passionate about, so special education is not one that I'm too worried about. She is doing a 50-state tour, was just announced, and we have extended an invitation to Montana. Montana is so unique. I do think it's important that they hear from us and understand what our landscape is like, what our demographics are like. And so I want to make sure that they have a chance to hear from all of us here in Montana about what we would like to see happen with the Department of, with the education at the federal level. So one thing that I have been advocating for is that they return the federal funding and the Office of Education at the federal level to the states, because right now we get somewhere around 47 cents on the dollar by the time it makes it to Montana. So I would like to see that increase. I would like to make sure that we get that funding directly to our classrooms in Montana. So I am in support of that. Obviously, there's a lot of important details in the middle that we would have to work out, and I would hope to work with all of you on. Another thing that I think goes unnoticed, since you were mentioning some things that might not get brought up very often, is the land board. In Montana, we have 5.2 million acres in school trust lands and 6.2 million acres in mineral rights that go to fund our schools. And we have a lot of folks come up and make public comment at those meetings or get involved in land board decisions, but I don't see educators or folks that are interested in education at the land board meetings very often. And that brings in over $50 million a year to our $50 to $80 million a year to our school systems in Montana. And I'm one of the 5 voting members on the land board. So that would be something I would encourage you to think about. A lot of folks don't realize that our timber sales and all of our easements for internet access lines being put in and all of that go through that voting process and benefit our schools and our universities in Montana. Something about teacher recruitment and retention I wanted to mention is we hear a lot from our educators in the field that we have these increased behaviors that are challenging in the classroom. And that's where I think those para-educator programs we have are incredible. We have pathways now for para-educators to get their special education endorsements. We have pathways for CTE teachers, for folks from the industry world to come in and share their trade and their construction knowledge, things like that, as a teacher in the classroom. And I wanted to thank, I saw Dr. Lee and his team are here earlier. I wanted to thank U of M because I mentioned some of these thoughts and what I'm hearing from these teachers in the field to him, and he immediately sent a team out to get CPI trained, that's crisis prevention and intervention training. And so when they graduate in their education program now, they'll come to the schools with that. So I think that'll help our teachers a lot. We are just really excited about all the opportunities that we have before us. With the data modernization, we're streamlining all of the technology systems, and I actually renegotiated the contract because one thing that I thought got left out when the legislators and others were working on that that program was that something for the schools to really use. So we added a module that teachers can access daily that flags students that are struggling behaviorally, academically, and in other areas, and they can receive, it'll flag those students for them, even provide ideas on interventions, and the school can enter what interventions they're doing with those students. It's called MTSS, and then when they move from school to school, that information will travel with that student. So that's something I'm really excited about. And then I know my time's up, so just in general, I just wanted to say that the OPI had an eGrants tour, so we went all across the state to all the communities to help schools work on their school finance sheets and budget information. So we just wrapped that up, and we are also back to being invited and participating in all of the school administrators of Montana and superintendent meetings across the state. So my deputy and I and other staff will be traveling around to make sure that we're constantly listening and being responsive. So I'm just looking forward to being more collaborative with all of you and my colleagues in the future from the Office of Public Instruction. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks a lot. So we're going to break for about 10 minutes. This is the time of during our forum when we do table talks. So I'd like you all to introduce yourselves to each other at the table, formulate a question to ask our panel, and appoint a representative to ask that question. After the break, we'll start the Q&A portion of the program. And here's some rules on how this actually works. So see you in about 10 minutes. Thank you. So we'll have two board members going around the room with microphones. So if you're ready to ask a question, go ahead and raise your hand, stand up, give your name, and just get right to your question. All right, everybody's ready? Let's go.
We would like to address this to the two superintendents. That what about supplying housing? I mean, I know you've got so much problems with the budget already. This would add a lot more, but it would also help with teacher retention and ability to attract good teachers.
Yeah, I'll take the first stab at it. So it has been part of conversation, but when we're talking about what we do and what we do best, we educate kids. And so putting ourselves in a position where we're all of a sudden landlords and or managing staffing for housing, and then at what point do you determine who is the eligible person? Right, we have a group of employees that I refer to as our backbone employees. There are paraprofessionals, our bus drivers, our food service workers, our custodians, our grounds crew. They're making somewhere between $16 and $20 an hour. So do you prioritize those positions? Because people are not moving to Missoula to be a custodian. So they're usually people who already exist in our community who are struggling day to day to make ends meet. And so when we talk about things like that inflationary gap, right? So we can't give the raises that we need to be able to offer livable wages in Missoula to our backbone employees, the people who, if they were not there day in and day out, it would be really hard to operate our schools. So we've had those conversations, and it doesn't mean that we don't have facilities or property that could be, but what it would look like probably from a 30,000-foot view is that we would be asking for a request for a proposal or something like that for someone else to take over, manage, and do that. But again, it gets into like the who gets it, who doesn't. It's not going to retain a teacher, from our perspective. Montana, and obviously Missoula, we all experience the high cost of living. We're talking with our teachers who are working 2 and 3 jobs to make ends meet and to be able to afford to live here. So it's a really complex problem for us, but something that we have talked about.
Yeah, we have the same kind of perspective. We couldn't build enough of it if we wanted to, and someone still has to pay for it up front. Someone still has to foot that bill. So I think it would be, the idea is good, and I know there are lots of teacheries in other parts of the state. I'm not sure it works as well close to an urban area because, like Micah said, who gets it and why? How long do they get to stay? What happens when they're at their end of the 2 years? Are they paying us less than, they're going to have to be paying us less than market value to make that worth their time, right? So it is a very complicated monster, and I don't think that we could do justice by it. It seems like a good idea, but what I would really love, and this is a bit Pollyanna of me, is just to pay people enough that they could live wherever they wanted to live. That's That might be a sustainable solution if we could figure out the mechanism to make that happen. Now, that's a big ask, and I'm not Pollyanna about how do we get there. That's a lot of money from local taxpayers, the state, from, I don't know, heaven, wherever it comes from. That's a big ask, but that is a sustainable solution if we can figure it out at a state level and a local level, more so than the Band-Aid of teacher housing. But to your point, I lost a teacher who we hired in April who could not find sufficient housing for her living situation. She had a family anywhere near Lolo or Missoula or anywhere she was willing to drive from, and quit in July. I saw her one time. We hired her, and she quit because she couldn't find a place to live that met her needs. I'm sure there was a place, but it wasn't what they needed. It wasn't what she needed, and that happens a lot. So we're pulling from our local people who already have residents. The days of being a single teacher and having a place to live by yourself are gone. That doesn't exist right now.
I will add that the state legislature in the last session had a little caveat in the STARS Act that allows school districts to ask local voters to approve over-base levies in excess of their maximum budget. So our budgets are calculated by the state. They tell us, here's your maximum, here's the minimum at 80%. If you want anything in between, you have to ask your local taxpayers. So now they've given us a mechanism, and it's a pretty complicated formula where you can get a little bit of money. But I'm not willing to risk an operational levy for our school district, which pays for the books and the staff and the housing, not the housing, but the salaries and benefits and the curriculum and all those things. I'm not willing to risk not passing that levy to make sure that we get a little more money for addressing housing needs for our staff. So.
Real quick, I just wanted to jump in and add a couple of examples. In rural Montana, this is really critical. In Grass Range, when I was the superintendent there, I was the landlord of about 8 houses and lived in one myself. And it is a lot to take on for the school. But it was really critical to being able to have educators in that area. And then there's been some interesting models like in Big Sky where they had some developers come in that wanted to build, large condo apartment type buildings. And they said, in order for us to have the infrastructure for this to take place, you have to, they worked out an agreement that there would be a floor of housing, affordable housing for nurses and teachers in the community. So I know that there are those kinds of models going on throughout the state to make this work. I would love to see some flexibility in our school funding so schools could have the opportunity to use different budget streams, like if their building reserves were healthy and their buildings were doing well, they could use that to purchase teacher housing, for example, some things like that. So I do think it is worthwhile to explore, but I also agree that we just need to pay what we need to be paying our professionals for their great work. And the STARS Act, something else that I thought of is, so the main goal, right, was to bring up that base pay for our educators. But after that, you can also spread it out to increase bus driver salaries and those other components. And we did have almost every district put their paperwork in for the STARS Act. So we only have a handful of schools that will not be participating, mainly like our one-room schoolhouses. So thank you.
Over here.
Hi there, Susie. I'm talking to you, another Susie. I would like you and your staff to give us perspective on how you are preparing for the elimination of the United States Department of Education. And do you think such an elimination will actually take place?
Thank you for the question. We are preparing. We have been staffing up in critical areas, and we stand ready. I have reached out, as you know, and made a few trips over to visit with them about that because I want to make sure that we can get it taken care of and do it right. Like I said, with the whole goal and my big support behind this being that we get more money directly to the classrooms, to our students and our educators in Montana. However, we don't have a lot of details at this time on how that's going to unfold. There has been staff cuts at the federal level. We have pretty quickly been notified of who our new point of contacts are. I have already met with them, like the head of nutrition, for example. We have not seen any impact to our school nutrition areas, our funding in Montana, but we have been in close communication and with the folks at the Department of Education, and if we have a new point of contact, they have notified us right away. So we are keeping those lines of communication open. We stand ready. We believe it, we hope that it would just be a matter of the funding directly coming to us and us being able to directly provide that funding out to the schools in a bigger way. Obviously, we might need a couple of staff or just to make sure we shift things around and have people ready to do that. I'm excited right now. We are just bringing on new position. We were awarded by the legislature through our budget requests this year. We're going to have a school safety and wellness specialist to focus on mental health and supporting our school safety plans in alignment with the great work of the U of M School Safety Center, for example. So we are just making sure we have the folks we need in the right positions. I really have been listening to the staff at the OPI, and they said we need more people to do the work here and less management. And so we're shifting things and we're taking their input and feedback and excited about all of those opportunities. So I understand that it's a big shift, but I think it's a critical time to take a look at what we're really doing and where these funds are going and what programs are important to us. I truly believe we've got to get education back to the basics. We need our students to be able to read and do math and keep going from there. So I look forward to taking on the work and getting more money directly to the schools of Montana, to the classrooms, students and parents, families, educators, all of that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rose. I'm with a group here in town called Missoula Resists, but I'm also a proud parent of some NCPS kiddos. So our group was talking a little bit about we've heard snippets throughout the conversation today that have been really helpful about some of these different impacts. But as a parent, as a voter, what's hard to understand is kind of concretely what the impact is of these different changes that we're talking about at a national level, at a state level in terms of funding. So what is kind of getting affected in terms of our community education, of our children's education, and then what concrete actions can we as community members take to support these educational needs? Thanks.
Micah's got an example, so I'll go first. Honestly, we don't know. I don't know. I shouldn't say we. I don't know exactly what this is going to mean or what the changes that Susie just described that may be impending will actually mean on a day-to-day level at a school like Lolo School District. I'm not really sure. I know that if the funding vaporizes, some programs will vaporize with it. So some of those are directly tied. There are some other things like that can't vaporize. Special education is a federally mandated program funded through local, state, and federal dollars. Well, that can't go away, and it's not just going to shrink or vaporize along with the funding stream. Funding for that's probably not going to go away. I don't think that would actually be the case. That would be lawsuits tied up in court for all time. But how those funds trickle down to the local level could absolutely impact us, and it could impact us in a positive way. If we have a little less red tape and a little more money to do the work, that will benefit boots on the ground, hiring paraprofessionals and specialized teachers to do that really difficult work in a lot of situations. So there's one concrete example as far as what you can do. Boy, just keep your ear to the ground because we are all watching this unfold in real time.
Check. Microphone check 1, 2. All right. Perfect. I think a good example and one that we contemplated for Missoula is our after-school program. So Title IV funding after-school programs are supported at 3 of our Title I schools. And so we specifically use about $230,000 to $260,000 to pay Missoula Parks and Rec staff and Boys and Girls Club staff to come in and work with our students after school. So you want to talk about the economic driver on this. What happens when you have a group of parents who are already coming from lower socioeconomic status, who now are trying to figure out, what am I going to do with my kid at 3:15? I'm trying to be in the workforce. I'm barely making it as it is, and now I'm either struggling to find childcare for my child after school, or I'm having to exit from the workplace early because I need to take care of my kids. So as community members, community leaders, business leaders, those are the things that we try and think about, is that broad perspective of, $250,000 in the grand scheme of things is not that much in the grand scheme of things, but it's that direct impact that will have a ripple effect through our community, and that little domino effect for those kind of things. And so those are the ones that we're concerned about. Title I, Title II. Title II is primarily professional development, but we use that for class size reduction. So we support 3 teachers specifically at Willard, our alternative high school. And so if those funds go away, I don't know where I'm going to find the salary for 3 teachers. So what happens to that? Well, maybe we're looking at reduced services at Willard, and where we've been able to support freshmen and sophomores and juniors and seniors, now we might only be able to support juniors and seniors. So we're eliminating safety nets. When we talk about the importance of education and having a diploma, and having kids who have some resiliency and have the social skills and all the other things that go along with education besides the basics, that's what we're talking about. We're having a direct impact on that. As far as what you can do, I think you need to be talking to your state legislators. I think you need to be talking to our national legislators. You need to be involved in the conversation. So often, and I think this is part of our downfall in education, is we just kind of sit back and take it. We just wait for it to happen to us, and then we react. And it's like, okay, we're putting out fire after fire, crisis after crisis. And I think this is an opportunity as a community to let your voice be heard and to say, you know what, this isn't okay with us. It's not okay for Montana. It's not okay for our kids. The fact that we're outsourcing jobs to the Philippines to get qualified teachers is a shame. That's a travesty.
Micah, that was a perfect segue into our question, so thank you. I feel like everything we've been talking about is, my name's Erica. Everything we've been talking about is a Band-Aid. The STARS Act is a Band-Aid. Like the difference between $38,000 and $41,000 is nothing. And I guess my question is, if our kids are in crisis, like, why are they in crisis? Not what do we do about it? It's more like, well, let's talk about why they're in crisis. There's a major mental health epidemic happening right now with our kids. We can't pay teachers. Our food that we give our kids is horrible. And so I guess, like, I love Montana. I grew up here. I went to public school here. I'm so thankful that I got to grow up in what I think is the best state in the country. And so why don't we have the best education system in the country? Like, why not be great? And I guess I want to know what your visions are for being great. Like, what would make Montana have the best educational system in the country?
Well, if I had the answer to that, I probably might not be sitting here right at this moment. No, I agree. I was born and raised in Montana, went through the public education system here, and wouldn't rather be anywhere else. But I don't know that there, is one answer. I think that seeing the challenges as a school administrator and the challenges that our kids are facing and working with those students and parents and my colleagues every day is why I wanted to be able to tackle some of these challenges at the state level. And I agree that we're talking about a lot of small fixes, not one giant solution like you're mentioning. So I really think it's going to take all of us coming together and working together and collaborating. And that's why I'm really excited about getting out here and, getting to go to the school nutrition program this morning where they're serving breakfast to community members, to any child under 18 for free at the school. Micah, let me attend that this morning, and it was just so fun to be with those kids and families. And that's something that the OPI and all of us work together to support. So one other thing about the food I wanted to mention is we worked with the Department of Commerce and the Department of Agriculture in collaboration with OPI recently to fund Montana Marinara. So we're using local produce and jarring Montana Marinara for all the schools in Montana. So that's something that's pretty exciting and supporting our local farmers as well. But there's a lot of work to do, you're right. And there's a lot of small programs. And when we look at the School Funding Commission, and when I've been meeting with other states across the nation, that was kind of the thing is like, do you fund each of these individualized programs, or you give the communities the funding that you can, and they know what their priorities are. They know what their families and students need, and you let it be more local control rather than so specified in how the funds can be spent and utilized. So I think that's something to think about. You said transparency earlier, Micah. When I looked at the best practices coming out from, for all of the states to consider, it's that we have a more transparent budgeting system and we have more local control where if you have mental health as a top priority in your community that you need to tackle, you can do that. If it's teacher housing, you can put your money there. Let those decisions be made at the local level. So that's one idea that I really appreciate. I'm excited about the opportunity of the School Funding Commission coming up and getting to take a hard look at that for Montana. So I think there's a lot of work to do, and I think all of us coming together and working together is going to be the best opportunity, but I don't have a finite solution at this time. Just, I think, doing everything we can and working together. Thank you.
I don't think there's a silver bullet, but I also would disagree with the question just a little bit. We have a world-class education system in Montana. The way we get there is a hot mess. It is a disaster. And like Micah said, you couldn't understand the funding formula with 2 weeks and a textbook. It's just complicated. But that doesn't mean we don't have great programs. Walk into any of your local schools. Walk into my school. You're all invited. I want to show you what we do. We make lunch from scratch and breakfast. Once in a while, something happens with the truck that delivers the food and we have to do a packaged whatever, but we're serving great food and it's local from Montana. But we have those programs because there's a little assistance in getting those local foods and produces and meats into our schools. So we are serving our kids great food. And I think that most schools across the state offer a great education and lots of opportunities to the kids that they serve. Could we do more? Maybe. Yeah, of course. I mean, we'd always like to do more, right? But if you look at the list of more that has been added on to public schools in the last 60 years, the list would make your head spin. And there is a mental health crisis. We all know this. That's not caused by schools, and we're doing our darndest to do what we can. The personnel aren't there to help us with that. There aren't enough of them, and we couldn't afford them if they existed. So there's a disconnect there for sure. But I think that Montana does offer a world-class education. We've got really good people and really smart folks coming out of our schools doing wonderful things for our state and nationwide. So I think that we need to honor the great things that are happening and figure out maybe a more streamlined way to get there so that we can just continue to do more and more.
Hello, my name is David. I'm going to try not to screw up this question. You were referring that the state gets 47 cents on the dollar for the federal dollars. I believe it was in conjunction with Title I funding from the Department of Education. With the Department of Education going away, is the state going to get $1 to $1 now? So it's not going to decrease. We'll actually get $1 to $1 because the state is going to take on all the additional costs of administrating it?
Okay, great question. So that was an approximation, just so you know, overall with federal funding. That's, around about what we get by the time it makes its way through all the processes. Another thing we talked about is, you talked about the red tape. The amount of reporting, I know sometimes there's been question about the number of administrators we have in our schools as well. The amount of reporting and time that we have to sit as a school principal or superintendent behind a desk, as well as our clerks and other support staff filling out our cooks in the kitchen. I mean, filling out paperwork for all of these funds, the strings attached to all of the federal funds, the way that it was done before, has been a real challenge. It takes us away from being instructional leaders. It takes us away from time to work with students and teachers and families in our communities and do things like this. And it's become an unbelievable burden, and it ends up costing at the end of the day, right? So that is one thing I want to point out that I'm big on, is making sure, and we have already gotten huge relief in reduction in reporting requirements on Carl Perkins, our CTE, for example. So we have to fill out the CTE, the Carl Perkins for career and technical education. We have to fill out reports to the federal government on that. And then we also have to fill out the reports to the state, right? So I am excited about reducing what I can at the state level. The federal has already been reduced. So we're excited to provide some relief to our schools in that. And another exciting thing from legislation is that House Bill 357 passed this session, which provided career and technical education to middle schools that I didn't get a chance to say earlier. But back to your question, I do not know the exact trade-off. And like I said, it could mean that we need a couple more additional staff at the OPI or to shift things around. However that looks, I'm committed to making sure that we are more responsive and increase our customer service at the OPI. So I would want to make sure we had the capacity to do it well. And that's why I've been reaching out regularly and hoping to know. And I don't know that it would be one-to-one, but we would expect an increase for sure. And so that's what I'm hoping comes from that. So thank you so much. Like I said, just major goals to get more funding to the classrooms.
Hi, my name is Margaret, and Susie, you half answered this question kind of. You said you'd hired a new person in OPI on the mental health front. And so the question is, are there dedicated funds in public school systems for mental health screening, but especially suicide prevention screening? Any of you can answer.
The short answer is there is no dedicated funding stream for that, but we do provide that. The legislature just passed or re-upped a law that basically in the past it was recommended that you do suicide prevention training with staff. Now it's required for staff every 3 years. At every district school I've ever been in, we've taken that on regardless of whether or not we're getting additional funds to do those things. We have our CSCT programs, which really is meant for those who would qualify socioeconomically, meaning they're Medicaid eligible. And so we have, some different programs, but it's not serving all of the different needs.
Hi, my name is Kirsch, and my table was wondering, what do you think would be the best outcomes from the decennial study that would help inform how we move forward into the uncertain future?
I think, like I've heard you guys say as well, I think we just need to simplify and we really need to make it more transparent. When we are working with a new school board member, I don't know how you guys have ever felt about this, but it seems that elections happen and then we've got the budget meeting coming right up, right? And trying to get folks versed in all of the different funding streams and the permissive levies versus the non-permissive levies and all of that. And so we can get that budget finalized it's a large learning curve, and then all the different funding streams. And every school you go to is different. In one school I was in, we had metal mines funding, for example, from an old mine in the area that could only be used in certain ways with very particular restrictions. So even moving as a superintendent that's well versed in these things to a new school, you have new things to learn. So it's just very overly complex and creates a lot of challenges. So I think however we could simplify that would be huge. And like I said, put more local focus so schools can decide if they want to work, if mental health or suicide prevention efforts are their top priority or what their top priorities are. Schools can use their Title IV funding for suicide prevention efforts. There are a lot of programs through DPHHS. In a lot of communities, there are local support systems that provide the suicide prevention training at no cost. As far as screening for students, some communities are in favor of that, some are not. It's definitely an area that I'm very passionate about and involved in, and so there's a lot to offer. The threat and risk assessment training is really amazing, and I think an important piece. That's why we want to help schools. So we're hoping to have staff trained up in the capacity to go out and train school staff to do those screenings, to check for student safety and mental health as necessary. A lot of our schools, and especially in our smaller district, only the school psychologist is trained to provide that screener, and I've seen that be a major challenge in our schools. So I went back to your question a little bit as well, sorry.
Yeah, these are things that I think collectively we spend a lot of time talking about and wanting to ensure that our students have not only access, but equity in their education. And I think it starts with really having a shared vision about what we want Montana education to be. And it's hard to put a price on that. If you were to compare us to other states, our state needs to pump $1.4 billion of money on a per student basis. We need $1.4 billion more to reach the same funding level per student as a state like Massachusetts. It takes a hard look as educators. We have to look internally at our practices and what we do and how we do it, and ask ourselves, is this model of education that we've been doing for the last 110 years the absolute best that we can do for our kids? I think that takes a really hard look at our practices. And does the only learning that happen inside the four walls of a classroom, or are there other ways that we can engage our community, engage our parents, engage our stakeholders in providing an education for our students? I think we need to get away from this manufactured crisis in education, where we're spending more time talking about what bathroom a kid uses than what it takes to move the needle on educating a student. I think it takes a really hard look at determining what does it actually cost to educate kids. We are not in a business where we can raise our prices when prices go up. We can't raise the price of pickles when hamburgers become expensive. We don't have that luxury. We rely solely on someone else telling us what it's going to be, how much it's going to be, and whether or not we're going to have either state, federal, or local taxpayers say that they're willing to assume and foot the bill for that. So.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we are out of time, but thank you so much to all our panelists here. Let's give them a round of applause. And quick word of thanks to the Missoula Public Library for allowing us to use this wonderful event space, and for Silk Road Catering for the great food. Be on the lookout for next month's forum. It's currently finalizing development, but it will have something to do with the energy industry in Montana. So keep an eye on your email and on our website. Hope to see you next month. Thank you.